for the past 10 years. There are also people here, or there are people not here, who were regularly coming. Life circumstances came in the way, stuff happened, they weren't able to make it, they can't do all 10 nights. Some of you are here that previously were able to do all 10 nights, but now can't do all 10 nights because of certain life circumstances that change. So whatever opportunity, whatever time Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to spend here, we should take maximal advantage of it, because there's no guarantee that we'll have this opportunity again next year or ever again. So if we know that, if we recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this gift to be here, when really none of us probably are deserving to be here, and He still gave us this gift to be here, then it makes you realize, it makes you more grateful and thankful that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me this gift, I can't waste it. I really can't waste it, because the gift that He's given us is going to be the spiritual nourishment that takes us throughout the next year, until the next Ramadan. And all of us need that spiritual nourishment, because as soon as most of the people who do sunnah itikaf, as soon as they're about to leave, they say, I don't really want to go back. Because the moment they go back, they start mixing back into the regular environment, and they feel the difference as soon as they leave. So that's going to happen, but the goal over these next 10 days is to build yourself up towards that, so that you can be more prepared for it. The next thing is, just because some of us are doing nafil itikaf, that shouldn't mean necessarily that we're spending the whole night hanging out, talking outside, away from the masjid. Even if we're doing nafil itikaf, the majority of our time should still be spent in the masjid as much as possible. Whether it is work for trying to finish our khatam or trying to read more Quran, there'll be some programs that we have, there'll be potentially inshallah a tajweed program that we'll have. All of these things that are happening to try to keep us in the masjid as much as possible. So some of the intentions that we can make over here is to, So some of the intentions we can make over i'tikaf is, one, that inshallah you're going to pray all 5 salah in congregation, in jama'ah. While you're here, there should be no reason that someone is sleeping through a salah. If you see somebody in the modular, they're sleeping, someone in the room is sleeping, try to wake them up. Because it's such a waste that we're here already in the masjid, we don't have to drive anywhere, and we're still missing the salah in jama'ah. So no matter what happens, we should try to do that inshallah. As much as possible, we follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. If you have a miswak, use a miswak. And many other sunnahs, inshallah, will get too long if I mention all of them. To try to protect our hearing, sight, tongue, and limbs from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden. So that requires potentially staying away from our phones. Some people, we've noticed people come to i'tikaf and they're watching TikTok or social media or Instagram on their phones in the masjid. So ideally, you want to try to turn your phone off and leave it away. Tell your family members you're not talking to them. If you need to check it once a day, even if you're doing nafil i'tikaf, if you need to check it once a day and let your family know you're okay, check on somebody, that's fine. But try to keep it off as much as possible. If there are opportunities to listen, to sit in certain gatherings that are of dhikr, of Quran, then that'd be great as well, inshallah. And to try to seek Laylatul Qadr every night. So try to seek it, especially in the odd nights, but every single night to try to find some opportunity to seek Laylatul Qadr, inshallah. Now, a couple of just logistics, particularly for those who have registered with Kufa for the nafil i'tikaf. You'll notice that everybody will gather around here for snacks. Ideally, please leave those snacks for the sunnah mu'tafiqin. Okay? Leave it for them. We will have snacks for you in the modular after Shaykh Omar's talk at midnight is over. Okay? Once the talk is over, there'll be snacks there. I promise you, inshallah, they'll be just as good, or we'll try to make it just as good as the snacks here. So don't worry, you're not going to miss out on anything. And if you have something specific you want, let us know. We'll try to get that as well, inshallah. So that's one thing. The second thing is, many of you are going to leave your belongings, if you're doing i'tikaf with us, belongings, your stuff in the modular. We want to try to keep that place as clean as possible, also recognizing we're probably going to be eating sometimes in the modular for our snacks. So if somebody can volunteer every day to vacuum, maybe after the Dhuhr talk or something like that, that'd be great. Just so we try to keep that place as clean as possible. If you have your bedding, have your stuff, try to make sure you roll it up and put it to the side as best as possible, inshallah. We want to just try to keep it as clean as possible. If you can, please limit the belongings that you have to the things that you absolutely need, okay? That you bring into the modular. Keep them in your car, keep it somewhere else. Only please bring, because we're very short on space. We have to see how many people are going to sleep there. Inshallah, I think it'll be enough. But as more people come in over the weekend, it's going to get tight. So if you can keep as much stuff as possible away, that'd be great. All of the talks that we're going to have are going to be in the masjid here in this space, just like this. Okay. After Isha, after Witr, there'll be the snacks time, and after those snacks, there'll be a talk here with Shaykh Omar. Then after Dhuhr will be one other talk, and after Asr there'll be another talk. I'm not mentioning the people because as you guys know, there are some special guests coming, surprise guests coming. So inshallah, we'll be alternating around a little bit as to when those talks are going on. So keep you updated as some of the program may change, but those are the main times we'll have talks to sit here. It'll be after the snacks at midnight, after Dhuhr, and after Asr. So just try to be there during those times, inshallah. Any questions? Well, for the people who have signed up with Kufa, you'll get a name tag or just like a name tag. So please keep that on at all times so we can know that you're a part of it. If you haven't registered through Kufa, not because we don't like you, but please leave that modular alone and only let the people who register with Kufa go there. Not because we don't want people going in there. One is just for safety purposes, so we know who's actually going in there and who's coming out. And two is because we've just allotted a certain space that can accommodate that area. So if too many people go in there, it can be a problem. So if you haven't, please, that's just the only recommendation, that to stay in here. You'll have your snacks here, and you'll have your own program, especially for the youth, that's dedicated for Nafil I'tikaf. As much as possible, as Farhan Bhai said, please don't use this bathroom. Either use that one, or if you can go home, then just go home and come back, if you live close enough. There's no bathroom in the modular, so there's nothing there. And so that would be the best one. Another thing is, if you're doing Nafil I'tikaf, as much as possible, if you see opportunities to do khidmah of the sunnah people doing I'tikaf, please do so. Because they can't leave the masjid. So there's opportunities for you to get something for them. They left something, their family member has something. Please try to do that. Because just as that, all the other ibadah that we're doing here, this is also ibadah, and it's serving the people who are doing sunnah I'tikaf. And then you'll get their du'as, inshallah. Anything else that I missed? Okay, any questions? Yeah, sorry, if yours were pure weight, you're fine.
You mentioned Tajweed program?
Yeah, so we're thinking, inshallah, we're hoping after the Dhuhr talk, we're going to try to find a way to get an opportunity for people to work on their Tajweed with a few people, inshallah. So stay tuned.
What time is Qiyam start?
The actual Qiyam, Farhan Bhai probably knows that. Farhan Bhai? 4 o'clock? 4 to 5.
And the suhoor is after.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, inshallah. If anything comes up, you can ask myself or Jeffrey Bhai in the back, who's there as well. Please, any questions that come up, please do ask, inshallah. And now, inshallah, Shaykh Omar will give his talk for the introduction of the Hikam.
الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. So every year when we do our itikaf programs, we usually pick a topic. Traditionally we would pick a topic, rarely a text, usually not a classical text. I think one year we used an introductory text in Arabic, and we went through some of that. But generally it would be different themes, or maybe the 99 names of Allah, or we did Jannah and Jahannam one year. And so over the past 10 different years, there have been many different topics, and this year is a little bit different in that we're actually going to be covering a classical text in Islamic spirituality. And I don't know, just as a forward, I just feel so small to be able to teach something so big. And you just think about who these great masters were and the legacy they left behind. And it's just a blessing that we can even take their names. And the fact that we are carrying, sitting in a circle in the 21st century in Tampa of all places, even reading something like the Hikam, it just blows my mind, right? So, like 700-800 years after it was written, you think about what type of circles of saints and what type of circles of scholars sat and perused these pages and contemplated its meanings. And here we are feigning to continue that tradition. Khair, I want to begin by establishing one very clear reality. And that reality is that Islam is rahmah. Islam is rahmah. Islam is what? It's rahmah. And many people, sometimes it doesn't feel like that to them. Right? Their Islam feels heavy. Their Islam feels restrictive. It feels like a lot of things, but it doesn't feel like rahmah. And there's reasons for that. But to understand how it's a rahmah, we have to understand something about human psychology. All of human beings are driven by one very simple principle, which is the principle of jalbul manfa'a wa daf'ud dar. Human beings are trying to optimize their benefit, and they are trying to prevent harm from their own selves. Right? This is just how people operate. Now you can say, well, that doesn't always make sense. That's not always true. People kill themselves. So how is that beneficial? But I can tell you, the person who is killing themselves at the point that they commit suicide, for them, the pain of existence is less than the pain of death. So for them, it was they feel in their mind, right? They feel in their mind that I'm doing the thing that is more beneficial to me at this point in time. The problem is that, so if we understand that principle, the next principle is that the way by which this is actualized, meaning the way that we optimize benefit and the way that we minimize harm, is through Islam. Right? That's the vehicle by which this whole algorithm is maximized. And the problem is that the reason that you need Islam is because human beings are pretty poor. They're acutely poor at serving it as agents for their own good. Right? You look at the young children. All they want is candies, right? I mean, my 5-year-old, I don't know how many cavities he has in his mouth, right? It's like they just want to eat candy and they just want to play. And you become teenagers and you just want to chase behind girls and just stand in front of the mirror and make your hair. And then you become young professionals and you're just trying to compete in the corporate rat race and chasing money. And then you become old and you try to make a name for yourself and you try to become prominent. And then in each one of these things, you look back and hindsight is 20/20, it's just silly. But and when you're in it, and it's not like one person is doing that. I mean, you have billions of people pretty much following the same script across cultures, across countries, across epochs. There's people sort of do the same thing, and none of these things really serve their own selves very well. But in the point when they're doing it, they think that they're doing something good for themselves. And this is something that we're going to see in the text, is that many times perception and reality are two different things. Sometimes you think something is good for you, but the reality is going to be the actual opposite. And Ibn Ata'illah does an amazing job sometimes of turning the world on its head. That sometimes you will see the world in a certain way, and then you realize what you thought was black was actually white, and what you thought was white is actually black. Another example is that so many people, even who care about deen, they have this sense inside that, I need to do something for Islam. I need to do khidmah of the deen. When in reality, Islam doesn't need us to serve it, right? In fact, Islam is actually serving us, right? It's teaching us how to live the good life. Islam, as it started in its inception, began by reforming people's beliefs, right? And this was what was required so that people could think properly, All right, once the mind is rectified, then it becomes the agent by which people can process information and perceive and interact with the world. So that had to be rectified first. And once that operator fell into line, then the second thing happened is that Islam turned towards people's hearts. Because when the heart is really at the core of the matter, the Prophet says, إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ لَمُضْغَةٌ إِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَإِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَتِ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ أَوْ كَمَا قَالَ. That know that in the body there is a limb, that if it goes good, then if it goes bad, then the entire body goes bad. And if it goes good, then the entire body goes good. And know that it is the heart. And when the heart becomes rectified, so first the mind is rectified through beliefs and the aqa'id, and then the heart became rectified, and the Sahaba became children of the Akhirah, then it became very natural for them to pursue what is true and to engage in righteous deeds. Right? This became sort of reflexive. And this is at the heart of it, and in essence, it's quintessentially why we're here on earth. Is to do good deeds and to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is actually the good life. This is the way that you live a good life here and you live a good life in the hereafter. People too easily fall prey to the trick of shaitan that somehow if they become religious, that all good and fun and happiness will end in their life. In fact, that is the beginning of happiness. Everything else is just chaos and darkness. So if we understand that Islam turned right after to Tasheel al-Aqa'id, after correcting the Aqa'id to the correction of the heart, this science of rectifying the heart is what we call Islamic spirituality. Right? It's Islamic spirituality. And in its broadest sense of the word, it encompasses the transcendent and inner meanings of the Quran and Sunnah, right? A very broad field. And over time, Islamic spirituality, the science of rectifying the heart, has assumed many different forms in the Ummah. One of the major and perhaps the most dominant form that it had assumed has been that of the Sufi orders. And they were great scholars in each one of those traditions that spend time, just like any of the other sciences, whether they're hadith or Quran, collating it, codifying it, and they develop different forms. They develop different practices. They develop different nomenclature for different realities, and they develop these sciences. And there's many different, just like there's not only 4 madhabs. People think that there's only 4. There are many madhahib. There's 4 that are widely accepted and have been spread throughout the world. But there were other ones as well. In the same way, there's 4 or 5 major Sufi orders that were named not necessarily by the people who founded them, because it's hard to say that anyone quote unquote founds these orders. It's like that's equivalent to saying that Imam Bukhari founded hadith. It's like he was just continuing and crystallizing something that began much before it. Right? That's why they say that at one time Sufism was a reality without a name, and now it's a name without a reality. So anyway, what happened was, they ended up working on these, and the major orders were the Chishti Tariqa, eponymously named after Muhyiddin Chishti, the Qadri order, which is one of the very old orders, named after Abdul Qadir Jilani, and the orders were named after certain scholars that contributed inordinately to the science. Right? They made such a grand contribution that the orders after them bore their name. What's that called? The Naqshbandi Tariqa with Bahauddin Naqshband. I actually last year had the opportunity to go and visit Uzbekistan, and you see all the great scholars and their resting places over there. And it's everywhere. I mean, it's like even the streets are named after Naqshband. There's like tea shops, like the Naqshbandi tea shop. It's just very open, and that's something to sort of bear in mind. That We haven't really been exposed to this in the US, but there was something in the ether throughout Islamic history. It was just a part of and parcel of everyday society, that there were, saints and knaves, and people honored honored the saints, and they honored the scholars, the men of God. And so there we talked about the Naqshbandi tariqa. There's the Suwardis and Sohrawardis and the Shadlis. And Ibn Ata'illah, he actually trained under Abu Abbas al-Musri, who was the student of Shaykh al-Shadli, right? So he was like two steps below the Grand Shaykh, is where he trained. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And when a person would get involved in one of these Sufic orders, it typically involved training under the tutelage of some type of Sufi master, or what would they call a sheikh, right? There's one way that this rectification of the heart, or Islamic spirituality existed in the Ummah, was in the form of these Sufic orders. Another way that it existed was non-order based spirituality. It's not like they had a monopoly on all of spirituality, or that there's only one way to Allah. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. So you had the likes of Ibn Taymiyyah, you had the likes of Ibn Jawzi, you had the likes of Ibn Rajab Hanbali, and many others, right? That perhaps you can make the argument that they were, even though there's some evidence that they had a khirqa as well, but largely speaking, you can say that they were not fully or clearly adherents of one of the major Sufic orders as we understand them. But that being said, right, what can probably be advanced is this idea that through most of Islamic history, that the predominant way that Islamic spirituality has been learned, practiced, and expressed itself has been through these orders. And part of it is because if you didn't have a teacher, there's a lot of pitfalls. Right? There's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of ways that shaitan, as soon as a person gets serious about Allah, and you want to try to get close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you know who's going to start taking you serious? One is Allah. فَاذْكُرُونِي أَذْكُرْكُمْ. Allah will remember you, but then also shaitan. Right? When you're just playing around and you're just living in ghafla and you're completely hiddenness, he's like, you're enough for your own self. You don't even need a shaitan. You're a little shaitan yourself. Just go live your nice little life. But as soon as you say that, I'm not going to listen to the puppeteer, and you reach up with your scissors and you cut the strings, he's going to take you mighty seriously. He's going to take you mighty seriously. And that's why it becomes a lot more difficult. And that's why, and the higher you go, the more subtle the tricks become. Right? They say that the shaitan of an alim is also an alim. And really, you would be surprised. There are shayateen that will sit and they will study the Sahih Sittah, right? So that they can understand some of the secrets of how the ulama understand things, so that they can misguide them. Right? They're just like that deeply immersed. And there's also good jinns. Like one of the teachers who I used to study with in that time, it was probably like the early 1900s. They would have, the dars. At least I was told they would have like the dars guy, and they would leave some space open because the jinns would also come, and they would also study hadith. Good jinns, right? Not the shayateen jinns. So I mean, there used to be a different time, right? Different time, different place. But there was a lot of pitfalls, and the lack of mentorship was extremely problematic, and that's why it was often advanced as this idea, almost this necessity that you have to have a sheikh, right? Or if you don't have a sheikh, then you're going to be in trouble. The very famous statement that whoever doesn't have a sheikh, their sheikh is shaitan, and there's some truth to that, right? There is some truth to that, but it should not be taken as an absolute, and especially. And it shouldn't, especially in this time when corruption has become widespread, and some will even claim that the times of the Kamil Shaykh are gone. Right? There were some people that were just like giants. It's like you don't have people the likes of Imam Ghazali walking around. That's not the times. Everyone is towards the end of time. People are struggling, and so it's not the same. And you have to be aware of that. But one would be hard-pressed to argue that progress under mentorship is not safer than progress in the absence of mentorship. Right? That should come as a no-brainer. And so you just keep a modicum of common sense and healthy skepticism if something seems to be going awry. So that's one aspect, that it's safer. The other thing that what sometimes people don't understand is that when you have a teacher or a mentor, things become a lot easier. Right? Shaykh Zafar Uthmani, he actually talks about this, that it's not an absolute that every person has to have a shaykh. He's about if you don't have a shaykh, then the path to Allah becomes harder. Yes, you can reach Allah, right? You can have that connection with Him, but it's just a little bit harder. And that's something that we need to remember, that in the end of this, regardless of which way a person goes, the goal is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? All of Islamic spirituality, what does it concern itself with? It concerns itself with worship. It concerns itself with turning away from the dunya by devotion to, it concerns itself with following the commandments of Allah, and concerns itself with good character. You know, I was just having in the module right now, my son, and I was just having a discussion with him about people who get really interested in a lot of the esoteric aspects of tasawwuf. And I told him, yeah, that it is true. People they want to know about the different levels of the ruh, and there's different ways you can go into the heavens and come back, and soul travel and all this. And it's like, yeah, it's just another flavor of Lord of the Rings. At the same time it's the same way that young children are captivated by fantasy genres, and that everyone likes Marvel comics, and everyone wants to have superpowers. And they're like, oh my God, I can be Harry Potter and Muslim at the same time? I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Right? I love Sufism. When in fact Sufism has nothing to do with that. Will you have Harry Potter moments in your spiritual journey? Maybe, right? It can't be denied. There's miracles happen, and supernatural and divine intervention happens, but that's not the goal. The goal is just Allah. And anyone who gets too caught up in all of these other sideshows, right? You will attain something, but you won't attain Allah, right? Because you're going in the wrong direction. So if this is the goal, then how do you get there, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're part of a Sufic order or you're not, the basic formula is going to be the same. It's going to be, first, you have to follow the Sharia. You have to follow the commandments of Allah. Number 2, you have to avoid sin. Number 3, you have to follow the Sunnah, right? Number 4, you have to adopt taqwa. You have to live like a righteous person. You can't just talk and live like a hypocrite and just say, oh yeah, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread. It doesn't work like that. And then you have to increase in your ibadah and your worship, and your, what's that called, supererogatory nafil worship, and you strive and you sacrifice for the sake of Allah. And in the end, so this is the way. Now, how does this actually end up working then? In the end, it's just Allah's the source of tawfiq, right? He's the source of all guidance, and He's the source of all benefit. So it's not the shaykh, right? It's not, the shaykh is not standing as an intermediary. Sometimes people get this idea that, oh, this is like the papacy, or you go and make a confession to, the priest, and the priest serves as your link between you and God. And I thought in Islam you can just directly connect to God. You should never think of the shaykh as someone who stands between you and God. You can think of him as someone who puts himself and he presents his back so that you can step on his back so you can reach your goals. Right? They're there to help. Right? They're there to facilitate. They're not there to stand in between. And in the end, right, the idea, what is important is that a person should feel that I need to adopt this Islamic spirituality because I need to fix my heart. And it doesn't, and the methodology that a person will pick will depend on their own proclivities and their methodological leanings. I mean, that's going to be sort of up to different people. لِلنَّاسِ فِيمَا يَعْشِقُونَ مَذَاهِبُ. Like for people, whatever they like, there's different ways. And وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. There's many different ways to reach Allah. But I told you, right, and even amongst the Sufic orders, you have to understand there's disagreement. It's not like they agree on everything. But there is something that you could say that on all of that there's an agreement with. And it's really about these two, that this tariqah, or Islamic spirituality, has to follow in tandem with Sharia. Right? If these two go together, then you're okay. And if they're not, then you're going to fall into deviancy. So we'll be covering the texts of one of the great masters on this spiritual path by the name of Ibn Ata'illah al-Iskandari. That basically indicating where he was actually born. He was born in Alexandria, Egypt, right? And he was born during the Mamluk regime around 658 Hijri. His full name was Tajuddin Ahmed, Muhammad ibn Ata'illah Iskandari. And at a very early age, he began to study Islamic law and usul, and he was a very gifted student. And he became, quite masterful in the Maliki madhab. And he became, quite proficient. And this is one of the things to bear in mind, is that on the spiritual path, oftentimes there's like this very standard progression, right? The very standard progression of people as they take their path to Allah. It's number one, it starts with knowledge. So people are, first of all, you're living in ghafla, you don't know what you're doing in life, you're just completely roaming on the streets like an alley cat. And then somehow, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strikes you with this epiphany that there's more out there. And then people, oftentimes, right, people who are serious about taking the path will find themselves at the threshold of the madaris or the Darul Ulooms, and they begin their journey of knowledge. But obviously, knowledge is not enough in itself, because knowledge deals with the mind and not necessarily only with the heart. And so after that, people would actually engage in the study of the inner sciences, like Islamic spirituality. And after that, they would engage in da'wah and telling people. So this is sort of like the progression. And you actually see this in Ibn Ata'illah's life as well, right? So he started studying, and at a very young age, he had this feeling like, I need to connect with someone. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. So at a very young age, he becomes connected to what's that called, his Shaykh, probably around the age of 16, which is surprisingly young if you actually think about it. You think what most 16-year-olds are thinking about right now is probably, I don't know, like fantasy football or something. And he is thinking about like, how do I connect with Allah? The fact of the matter is, at this point, he was already scholarly, right? Maybe 16 or early. We don't know exactly when he was born, but it was definitely early in his life. And the story goes that, what's that called? Imam Shadli had a Khalifa. He had authorized a Shaykh after him, right? Which was whose name was Abu Labas al-Musri, and Abu al-Musri had some students, and he had a disagreement with the students. So he got disinclined towards the Shaykh. He's like, I don't know if I have to do anything with him, and so what's that called? And this can happen sometimes, right? I mean, I've seen this with other Shaykh, like their kids, their followers can sort of make a cultish vibe around them, which is really turn-offy, right? So I remember when I used to sit with one of my teachers in the early itikafs, when we were in Chicago, I was sitting with my Shaykh, and all of us would be wearing white, all of us have turbans, and there's like, it was a hole in the ground, like, and there's like 600 people down there, people getting meningitis, God knows what else is going on down there, right? So, and people were just coming because it was just like there was something special going on down there, and many of us would sit like very close to the Shaykh, and people would come in and they're just talking in the back. They're like, yeah, the white knights are up there, we can't get in, and so they just had this feeling, and obviously that wasn't even there was no sense of hierarchy or anything like that, but people felt excluded. And when he actually heard that, he said, none of you guys are allowed to sit next to me, right? You all have to sit, and he pushed everyone out, so make it more egalitarian. So anyway, he found something from his students. He had a disagreement with him. But then he said, you know what, let me just go check the guy out. If there's something good in him, I'll see signs. So he goes to one of his majalis, and he was talking about what they call darajatu salikin, the different levels of the person who's on the spiritual path. And so he starts by talking about based on hadith of Jibril, that the first level being Islam, and the next level being Iman, and the next level being Ihsan. And he was talking about, what does Islam mean? And it's submission, and what happens when you're at the level of Iman, and then what happens at the level of Ihsan. And so that, it was powerful. But then he said, after that, he said, وَإِن شِئْتَ قُلْتَ. And he said, if you want, then you can also reclassify the whole spiritual path like this. And he said that you can say that the first stage is ibadah, and the second stage is ubudiyya, and the third stage is abuda. And he described each one of these different things. And he says, وَإِن شِئْتَ قُلْتَ. And then if you want, you can divide it like this. And then he went to haqiqa and tahaqquk, and he said, إِن شِئْتَ قُلْتَ. And he kept on going, and by that point, this guy was like, what in the world is this person? He's like a master of this whole field. And so he went home, right? Something had happened. He sat in that gathering and something happened. And he went home. He didn't feel like sitting with his family. And he just went and sat outside. And he just started looking at the stars, all by himself. And he was just thinking, he's like, what's going on here? Something had moved inside him. And then meaning started opening to him that had not opened to him before. And he knew that this was special. And this is something to understand, that we're in a desert. We're in a spiritual desert. And the people who inherited from the Prophet ﷺ are like wells. If you're thirsty, don't eat sand. It will only increase your thirst. You need to find a well. And as our Shaykh used to tell us, he said, you can't just go to a desert and take a little scoop, right, of the sand and that water will appear. He said, if you want to find water, you need to dig deep. And that's one of the mistakes that people make, that they go to a Deen intensive, or they go to an ISNA convention, they go to a Miftah event, that weekend they get a little Iman high, and then like 3 days later it's just washed out, right? It's just complete wash. You're just back to, it's the same old me, right? Year after year, year after year, year after year. What happened was, for something to take hold, you got to go somewhere and you have to sit, right? You have to dig, and you have to dig long and hard. And so, he was, continued to, this was still weighing on his mind. The next day, he said, I need to go see him. And I can tell you, this happens with me too. Like I will sometimes sit with my Shaykh, and even in such nuanced, subtle meanings open on me, even when he's speaking about the most mundane things, like deep spiritual lessons. I'm like, oh my God, like what is going on here? This doesn't even make sense. But it does make sense, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept my spiritual rizq in that well. So when I'm thirsty, I just go and drink from the well, and Allah's the one who feeds you. So he went to the Shaykh, and he told him, I love you. And he replied to him with the sunnah reply, أَحَبَّكَ الَّذِي أَحْبَبْتَنِي لَهُ. And then, he said, then he started opening up to him. And he's like, I have these problems. And he just started opening his heart. It just started all coming out. And I can tell you, I had a close friend of mine who was in New York. And he wasn't very connected to Deen at all. He was just sort of like a young punk kid type of thing. And someone said, there's this really big Shaykh that's visiting. Let's go visit him. I said, all right, man, let's go. And he had his backwards hat. And he was sitting in the gathering, and the Shaykh was giving a talk somewhere else. And that Shaykh, from across the room, he saw this young man, and he pointed to him. He said, "You come here." So the Shaykh, he said, and he told me the story himself, right? And so he came and he sat next to him, and then he just looked at him, and he said, "Gee," and it just hit his heart so hard, he just started crying. He started crying, and he said, "Hazrat, I'm like this, and I'm like this, and just everything." And then he started studying Deen, and he eventually became, a Shaykh himself, and served the Deen so much. Allah took a lot of work, from him, subhanAllah. But that's how, it was like those moments. So anyway, he comes to his teacher, and he's just opening up his heart. And he's saying, "I had these problems, this, that, and the other." And Shaykh Musri, he tells him, he says, look, People are either in one of four states, there's not a fifth, right? Either you're going to be in a state of blessing, you're going to be in a state of tribulation, you're going to be in a state of obedience, or you're going to be in a state of disobedience. If you're in a state of blessing, then you need to be grateful. If you're in a state of tribulation, you need to be patient. If you need to be in your state of obedience, then you need to bear witness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you. And if you're in a state of disobedience, then you need to make tawbah. That's all he told him. 4 things. He said, I walked away from that gathering. And I was walking, and he's like, even if I wanted to think, I felt like all my problems went away. He didn't have, it wasn't, no, he didn't have this period where he's thinking, okay, how do I solve these problems? How do I, sort of execute these advices that he was giving? Just from the barakah of the interaction, he just walked away, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cleared that from his heart. Because these are matters of the heart. And then, he told him, if you keep on this path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make you a mufti of both, Sharia and Haqiqah. And really it became like that. And so this was what happens. You go to the teacher, you have a deep spiritual problem, you have things, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts something in their heart, they give it to you, and then you're like, wow, this works. And then it's an iterative cycle, right? And it creates a very deep, very intimate bond, right? And as they used to say, لَوْلَا مُرَبِّي مَا عَرَفْتُ رَبِّي. If it wasn't for my teacher, I wouldn't have known Allah. And that's the greatest gift that your teacher can give you, is the ma'rifah of Allah. I can tell you, if it wasn't for my teachers, I wouldn't know A from Z in the deen, right? They showed you the way that Islam should look. They painted a picture of Islam that's so beautiful that now it's so easy for me to feel, number one, confident about my deen and share it to others, because I don't know anything in the world that is more beautiful than Islam. I can tell you, I would not have been able to get there on my own. Right? I would not have been able to get there on my own. So anyway, after he kept on training with his Shaykh, and then he moved to Cairo. So he was in Alexandria, now he went to Cairo. And actually he became a mudarris at a very famous Jamia university, at Jamia Azhar. So he used to actually lecture at Azhar. He lectured at other places as well. And he used to integrate stories of the righteous, and he used to integrate the primary text, and people would just be blown away. And from all the works that he worked on, probably the most impactful has been this work, and has been very abiding. And many people have used it as a curriculum for Islamic spirituality. And it's called the Hikam of Ibn Ata'illah. They're short sentences, and there have been like as many as 50 commentaries written on them. There's no way, in the amount of time that we have, we're going to go to any serious level of depth in covering these things, but at least just to give people a taste of what that world used to look like. And this is a first pass. Right? You can read Ibn Ajiba, and it's much, much deeper, and you can talk about the sir and the secret of the secret, and there's a lot of stuff out there. We'll be speaking at a much more, perhaps superficial level, but even the superficial, I think you'll find, is very, very deep. And so this has been studied by, across the Muslim world for centuries. He actually had dictated it to Imam Taqiyuddin al-Subki al-Shafi'i, and he took it from him. And later on, Shaykh Ali Muttaqi took these small statements that he made and made them into 30 different chapters, right? And he called it An-Nahjul Atam. And then on that, Maulana Gangohi wrote Ikmal al-Shiyam. So, and this was, and eventually he, passed away in Cairo, and he was buried there. There's actually a very beautiful story about him that, what's that called? When there was a very famous imam by the name of Imam Kamaluddin. And what's that called? He had come, and he went to visit the grave, and we've been told to visit the grave. So he went there, and he was reading Surah Al-Hud. And he got to, what's that called, the ayah, فَمِنْهُمْ شَقِيٌّ وَسَعِيدٌ. And from amongst them there are those who are wretched and those who are felicitous. So when he reached that, he heard a voice that came out from the grave. That لَيْسَ فِينَا شَقِي. He said, it said, Ya Kamal, لَيْسَ فِينَا شَقِي. That amongst us there's no one who's wretched. And so when he had this experience, he was so moved. In his wasiyah, actually, he wrote that I want to be buried over there, right, in that same grave complex. So anyway, the first chapter, so we'll begin with going over, do you mind passing me that? The first chapter is going to be the chapter of knowledge. There's a couple of aphorisms here. So let me just open the first one. There's only 3 in this chapter, so it's not going to be very long. Where is this? So he said that al-ilmu al-nafi' huwa alladhi yanbasitu fi as-sadr. He said beneficial knowledge is that which it expands in the shu'a'uhu, that its rays expand in the chest. وَيَنْكَشِفُ بِهِ عَنِ الْقَلْبِ قِنَاعُهُ, and that the heart uncovers its veil with it. So the first thing that he's talking about is beneficial knowledge. Okay, so if we look at the world around us, we are living in a time of unprecedented amount of information. It's absolutely crazy. You look at how fast human knowledge is doubling. In the 1900s, they used to say that human knowledge would double how many years? Every 100 years. And today, analysts estimate that the data right now in the world is doubling about every 12 hours to a few days. Right? It's just massive proliferation. You look at 2 million new academic papers every year. 100 million scholarly articles are in databases. You have 2.2 million books out there. Wikipedia has, guess how many pages it has? 60 million. Yeah, it's very close. 60 million pages itself. The internet itself has hundreds of billions of pages, right? And so perhaps no time in history have we had more information and more knowledge, but also no time in history have we seen greater tomfoolery. Right? People are more idiotic than you've ever seen in history. There's people have looked at this. There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what they say is that people who have low knowledge in a field, they overestimate their knowledge in the field and feel that they have expertise. Like, this is why you have people who know nothing about deen, and they said, but Allah says, and the Quran says, do you even know, have you ever read the Quran? Everyone becomes an automatic expert on Islam, right? With absolutely spending, because they went to Sunday school. I mean, it doesn't work like that. But in a digital age where it's so easy to access information, it creates this illusion of expertise. And you look at, most people in America, if you ask them to even point out Russia, like India on a map, they probably couldn't do it. They don't even know how many branches of government they have themselves in this country. You want to make America great again? Go and take Government 101 first and understand how the Constitution works. And so, there's tremendous, MIT actually did a study on this, and they found out that, when you have misinformation, that actually travels much faster on social media than actually real information, right? It's more saucy. So, and people don't read anymore. Think about it. When is the last time you, me, have read a book? Like, actually done deep reading of a book? It's all there. It's all in a PDF. It's on Kindle. The whole world is there on a Kindle, but no one opens a book anymore, right? People are reading Yahoo News, right? That's not even news. That's just like tabloids. I don't know what word to put for that. And so there's a difference between information and the difference between knowledge, because knowledge is supposed to have impact. Someone said about Hassan al-Basri. Someone came to Hassan al-Basri and they say, Ya Shaykh, we come to your majlis, and we really feel our heart is diseased, or there's a veil on our heart, something to this effect, because we come to your majlis and we listen and we don't even cry. And he says, oh, you shouldn't be worried about a veil over your heart. Your heart is dead, right? Because it doesn't feel anything. It doesn't move, right? That's the sign of death. And when knowledge comes into a person and it doesn't move something, right? That's a sign of our spiritual death. And so when we understand that there's a difference, so first there's a difference between information and knowledge. Now, once you get into knowledge, right, and knowledge is a thing that can move you, understand that knowledge doesn't always move people in the same direction. Knowledge can move people in a positive direction, or it can move people in a negative direction. So there could be some knowledge that's beneficial. It can also be knowledge that's harmful, right? So for example, if a person becomes, you're like, how can ilm be harmful? Well, look at the Yahud, right? وَاسْأَلْهُمْ عَنِ الْقَرْيَةِ الَّتِي كَانَتْ حَاضِرَةَ الْبَحْرِ. Ask them about the town that was right next to the sea. So there's a group from the Bani Israel, there was a group of Jewish people, they were right by the sea, and they had knowledge, but they used it to create legal loopholes, right? They tried to, quote unquote, outsmart Allah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He made them into monkeys and pigs, at that point. So that didn't really help them, right? There will be sometimes when a person has knowledge and they don't act on it themselves, then it becomes an argument against you. There will be people, we've been told, who will be khutbah. They will give khutbahs, they'll be giving lectures, they're running the circuit, and their tongues are going to get cut by scissors of fire in the akhirah. So yeah, knowledge doesn't always run that way. Right? It comes in one riwayah in Tabrani that the most severely punished on the day of judgment will be a scholar whom Allah did not benefit with his knowledge. Now a person can say, well, I'm never going to become a scholar. That's not the point. The point is that you should become the person who's a scholar who also acts or benefits from their knowledge. So it can be harmful, it can also be beneficial. And this is a knowledge, he said that if the knowledge is going to be beneficial, then the way that you know it's beneficial is it does two things. Number one thing, it expands the chest, right? Meaning that there's not going to feel tightness in it. When things don't make sense in life, when you have some cognitive dissonance, when you're going, there's a knot. Like, so for example, let's say you're walking around and someone said, oh, the Prophet ﷺ, he married a 9-year-old, and just something happened, right? It just hit that one time and you're like, yeah, that is sort of weird. I don't know how to make sense of that. Now you're walking around, you're praying namaz, but your heart, your chest is tight, right? You're not walking unencumbered anymore. When you do something wrong, right? Say you lied to your mom, you're going to feel a weight, right? Dishonesty carries a weight. And when you make tawbah, you become light, right? In the same way, when you are in confusion, when the picture doesn't make sense and you're lying to yourself, that's going to create a type of tightness. And then أَفَمَنْ شَرَحَ اللَّهُ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِنسَانِ فَهُوَ عَلَى نُورٍ مِّن رَبِّهِ. And when knowledge comes and expands that, because what it does is that it is a light. And the Quran talks about this in the parable of light, that there is a light, يُوقَدُ الزُّجَاجُ كمشكاة فيها مصباح الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار. So that when people are on their fitrah, if you're inherently good, then it's like you're a firework that's about to go off, right? You're full of light, you're almost luminous in and of yourself, and the Quran comes and touches your heart. And then it's the 4th of July, right? It's just light upon light, nurun ala nur. And so when the light of ilm or beneficial knowledge enters a person's chest, it does a couple of things. It removes doubts. If you're walking around in life and things about Islam don't make sense, or you don't know there's going to be hereafter, or you don't know that God exists, or whatever, that if there's doubts and there's suspicions, that knowledge will dispel that. And the second thing is that it will remove the delusion of the dunya, because all of the dunya is a delusion. And it removes desire. And the way that it removes desire is, they say, high emotion, low intelligence, right? When your shahwa and your desire comes under control, and that comes with knowledge, then the next thing that happens is it creates yaqeen. And you start to begin understanding those higher spiritual realities, like Abu al-Mursi said. And when we talk about yaqeen, Shaykh Mursi, he actually said, he was the inheritor of Ali radiallahu anhu, who said the same exact thing. He said, Wallahi, If the veil of the unseen were to be lifted, it would not have increased my yaqeen. Right? Wallahi, if I could see the angels coming down, if I could see like everything around, all of that, heaven, hell, it's that real to me. Because how did he get there? Right? It was through beneficial knowledge. That's what knowledge will do. So this is the level of certainty that true knowledge can bring. So the first thing is that it expands the chest, it enlightens the chest. The second sign of beneficial knowledge is that it removes veils. People don't realize how many veils they have and they're walking around with. We have so many cognitive biases. We have so many preconceived notions. People think that I can figure everything out myself. People think that I need to help Islam. I went into like one of my teachers one time, and he said, "Why are you becoming a doctor?" And I said, "Oh, I need to help Islam." And it's like, Islam doesn't need you. Like, who do you think you are? It doesn't need your money. It doesn't need your prestige. People think that money and prestige are indispensable. People, might feel that men and women have to be treated exactly the same way. People might feel that the measure of success of a country is by how much GDP we have. People have a lot of inbuilt, biases. And these influence the way that we process information. So the thing is that and even the things that we're seeking knowledge to get can be veiled. Meaning sometimes people say, I need to get knowledge. Why do you want to get knowledge? Oh, because it might be for any other ulterior motive. So there's different layers of veils that exist, and when those are removed, you're able to see things as they actually really are. Right? Imagine you're walking around the world, and you're thinking, like right now, say you're looking outside, and you're like, oh, it's actually night, but you didn't know that there was a tint. Right, like a black tint on there, and you're thinking like for the past 6 hours it's actually night outside, and it's actually like midday, right? And the only way you would know is either someone takes down the tint or you walk outside, right? And that's what true knowledge will do, is it will let you understand life for what it is. You look at sometimes maybe I'm just old, but I look at like young people and this type of stuff that they get excited about, and even old people like corporate America and all the way to the top and the elites, and the way that how they make such a big deal about falling in love and their shahwa and their desire. It's just laughable, right? When you see that for the reality of what it is, it's just like it's nothing, right? I mean, you see money. Women are willing to sell their bodies for money. Right? People are willing to sell their kids for money. People sell their souls to the devil for money. And then you look at it, I still remember my teacher one time, he said something like, one of the times that you see people, the worst come out in people is when people are getting a divorce. Right? They even have a spoon face, they fight over every spoon. So much ego, so much pain, so much hurt. And he said, yeah, if they're getting divorced, what's the big deal? Just give everything to her. It's just pieces of paper. But the way he said it, after that day, it just felt like pieces of paper, right? So now you begin to understand the almighty dollar has no might in it, right? That's reality, right? And then eventually you understand what the akhirah is and all this. So these are, and I remember when I first began training, I was very skeptical, number one, and number two, really into philosophy and intellectualism and all of these things. And I remember some of these biases going away, and I went and talked to my Shaykh about it. He said, these are like slabs. And when you remove the slabs, that's how you progress. And there was a lot of slabs. There's probably still, as dullard as I am, there's probably still so many more slabs to work on. But, so what is the reason, right? So now if you understand, what is one of the big veils? So even when you're seeking knowledge, why are you seeking knowledge? What's the whole purpose? The whole purpose of knowledge is to know Allah. It's not to become an alim. It's not so you can understand Quran and Taraweeh. The whole purpose to seek knowledge and beneficial knowledge is to know Allah. Right? That's why we learn the deen. That's why we learn how to pray. That's how, all of these different things are all so that we can know Allah. That's why Rashid Ahmad Gangohi, One time, he was a great scholar, and he was bite to someone. He was a student of another Shaykh who wasn't an alim. It was Haji Imdadullah rahmatullah. And he said that, no, why did you become his student? He said, Ana alimun bi kitabillah. I am an alim with the book of Allah, wa huwa alimun billah. And he knows Allah himself. So that idea, that the point of knowledge was to know Allah. The second, I'm going to just read the next two and then just comment on both of them at the same time. Because we only have 5 minutes. So. The second, they're really close. That خير العلم ما كانت الخشية معه. That the best of knowledge is when it is accompanied with fear. And al-ilmu in qaranathu al-khashya. And if fear comes along with it, فَلَكَ وَإِلَّا فَعَلَيْكَ. And if it's not, then it's against you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in one verse, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. Indeed, the ones who truly fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ulama. This is not fear in the conventional sense of fearing Allah. What this refers to is a type of love, a type of reverence that arises upon the heart when you know who Allah is. The grandeur of Allah, when it becomes so, His majesty is so real from you, then, the more you know Allah, the more you'll fear Him. They'll fear His punishment, yes, but more than that, they'll fear disappointing Allah. They're like, how can I do Allah like that? He's taking such good care of me. How can I do Allah like that, man? I can't do that. That's my Allah. That's my Rabb. Right? You're just scared of letting Allah down. They fear losing their connection with Allah. They fear that they will create some type of distance with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They fear that on that day there will be لا يكلمهم الله يوم القيامة ولا يزكيهم. There's some people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be so happy, so angry with, that He won't even talk to them on the day of Qiyamah. And they'll say, what if that's me? Right? What if I'm if the scholar that didn't benefit from his knowledge, that they have the worst punishment, what about me? Right? Actually, Ibn Ata'illah, he has such a beautiful dua. He said, Ya Allah, he said, I am ignorant in my knowledge, then imagine how ignorant I must be in my ignorance. Right? I mean, it's just, that's the state of people. So, and this is one way to know, right, that if the knowledge that a person is getting, if it's translating to increased fear, the way you know that is that you become more obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the last one about that knowledge when it's associated with fear, and we'll just close with this, otherwise it's against you. This is one thing to bear in mind. Sometimes people make the mistake that as long as you're doing something good, it's always going to be a positive outcome, right? I'm doing something Islamic. Of course, this is good for you. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes you can do something Islamic, and it could be taking you into the hellfire, right? For example, what if you're doing something Islamic, but you're doing it to show off, right? There will be a man who will be brought, and he will be thrown into the fire, and his intestines will spill out, and he will circle them like a donkey going around a millstone. And the people of the hell will gather, and they say, bro, right? Aren't you the person who used to tell us, come and pray tahajjud? Aren't you the one who used to be fundraising? Aren't you the one who used to tell us to not mess around with girls and all of this kind of stuff? And he said, I used to tell you to do it, but I didn't do it myself. لِمَ تَقُولُونَ مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ كَبَرَ مَقْتًا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ أَن تَقُولُوا مَا لَا تَفْعَلُونَ. Why do you tell people to go around telling people to do things and you don't do it yourself? And so, one of the things is that يُضِلُّ بِهِ كَثِيرًا وَيَهْدِي بِهِ كَثِيرًا. The same Quran can misguide people and it can benefit people. And so that's why we should not just rely on the fact that we're doing something good and just rest on our laurels. We have to understand that we're benefiting, right? That the knowledge is beneficial, and that's increasing us in our appreciation from Allah and taking us closer to Him. May Allah give us tawfiq wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alamin.